Hey guys, my name is Emma and today I'm doing a Like This, Try That Modern Classics edition. So what I'm doing today is I'm talking about 5 classics or modern classics and then linking them to a modern book that I think you'd enjoy if you enjoyed the classic version. So some of these are strict retellings, some of them are just, they have a similar vibe. The first book grouping that I'm going to talk about is a strict retelling as such, and that is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and I'm pairing it with Ahmed Sadaawi's Frankenstein in Bhagdad. Makes sense. You read him here, then he goes to Bhagdad. So for those of you who don't know, Frankenstein is one of the original sci-fi books out there. It kind of created that entire genre, and it tells a story of Victor Frankenstein who makes himself a monster and manages to bring it back to life. It's kind of bits of other people, and then it is the story of the monster. It's an epistolary novel, which means it is kind of a story told within a story. So it is a man writing a letter to his sister, which within it he meets Victor Frankenstein, who tells his story, and within Victor Frankenstein's story we meet the monster who tells his story to Victor Frankenstein, who then gets told, and you can see where my story within a story comes from. A Russian doll story situation, if you will. Frankenstein in Bhagdad is doing a strict retelling but taking it and now placing it in Bhagdad. Rather than Victor Frankenstein, our mad scientist who's trying to prove that he can make life, instead we have, I can't remember the guy's name, Hadi, who is a scavenger, and basically the government refuses to bury a body if it is not pretty much whole, so it doesn't bury any of the body parts that get littered around Bhagdad from all the various explosions because of all the fighting that is going on there. So what he does in protest to this is he gathers up all the body parts and then sews them back together to make a full man. He's then horrified at what he's done and goes to try and take it apart. He was going to give it to the government as a bit of an FU, but he realises just how weird what he's done is. However, when he goes back to try and take the body apart, it is gone. Now, in a similar style, you have that story within a story within a story, where his story is being told to kind of news reporter type thing. Within that, you then also get the monster, who we get some video recordings and voice recordings of his time. He ends up kind of creating a bit of a weird cult in the middle of Bhagdad. It's generally fascinating, and I think that they work really well together because, as well as mimicking a lot of the discussions of the actual content, the structure of the two books is very, very similar and very clever, and Ahmed Sadaawi is doing some really intelligent things when it comes to mirroring how Mary Shelley wrote. So I think that they are both absolutely wonderful, and if you do like Frankenstein, you will definitely enjoy this. Another strict retelling for you, so we have The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and then we have Dorian by Will Self. Apologies for the suddenly not safe for work, we do have a slightly fuzzy penis on the cover of this book. So, The Picture of Dorian Gray tells the classic story where Dorian makes pretty much a deal with the devil where his painting ages, but he does not. And it's really a story of kind of vice and luxury and what is good for the soul, and a whole conversation about that there. This book is taking that story but then placing it in with the gay scene in San Francisco, I think, but specifically around the AIDS and HIV epidemic and everything that was going on there. So essentially what happens is, rather than a painting, it's a video of Dorian that is one that ages rather than him and deteriorates, and all of his friends get and his kind of companions end up getting very, very ill, and he doesn't. It's a real interesting look at that whole time period and what was happening there in the gay community, and just a whole bunch of stuff. Both of these I read years ago. You might have noticed I can't talk particularly in depth about either of them, but I remember really, really enjoying both. And again, it's a strict retelling, so if you do like the story of The Picture from Dorian Gray, I do think you will really like this one. Will Self's writing is fantastic. Now we're going less into the strict retellings and more just now influenced by these great works of classic. So William Golding's Lord of the Flies, of which I unfortunately don't have a copy anymore, ta-da, it's now here, is the quintessential, studied by nearly everybody at GCSE, story of a group of boys who get stranded on an island and then form their own crazy society, and it is about the descent of man into animal nature and instinct, and basically human beings are dickheads if you leave them alone for long enough. I actually have 2 different books to recommend to you here if you do enjoy that story. The first one is Lost Boys by Christina Henry. This is Lord of the Flies meets Peter Pan, and basically is looking at the Peter Pan myth and the idea of like what happened with the Lost Boys before Wendy turned up and before kind of everything went down there. And it really does remind me of that Lord of the Flies feeling, where because they're children, violence doesn't really have the same ramifications and seriousness. They don't really fully understand what is happening, and there's a lot of death and it's very gruesome, this book, but in a way that feels weirdly light-hearted and like just kind of brushes over the horror that is happening when they go and fight these pirates and have all of their adventures that ends up with like half their troop dying or getting maimed and all these kind of things. And it is a really, really interesting look at the kind of underlying message behind a fairy tale. Alternatively, you could also try Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. This is weird, I'm gonna warn you that now. It's very satirical in nature, very stylized writing, do be aware of that going in, but it's essentially 50 contestants from a beauty pageant get stranded on an island and chaos ensues from there. It's kind of playing around with a lot of different tropes, playing around with different kind of concepts of feminism. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. There's a little bit of the vibe of The Beach, which was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, because one of the girls kind of goes a bit rabid and feral by herself, which is really interesting. I don't really know how I felt about this book. Half the time I thought that it was genius and like such a scathing commentary on society, and the other half of the time I was like, this is just madness and bad writing. And I kind of sway backwards and forwards from those two ideas, but it is clearly drawing strong kind of inspirational references back to Lord of the Flies. It is playing around with that idea of what happens when you leave people in a pocket of isolation to almost mimic society by themselves. Absolutely fascinating and good fun, very good fun to read. If you are a fan of the classic Orwellian future of 1984, you may enjoy Sulphuric Acid by Amelia Nothomb. So 1984 is the origin of the kind of surveillance state idea, where we are in a future post-apocalyptic words, in a future dystopian world where the government runs everything, and basically Big Brother watches all. You have to police your thoughts. Everybody kind of tells on each other. There's a lot of doctoring of news reports and things going backwards and forwards so that the government is always correct. It's a terrifying book to read because you then see so much of it mirrored in our life. Really, really scary. But if you do enjoy that, then you play around with Sulphuric Acid, which is taking more of a reality TV concept and taking that surveillance idea to its extreme. And the TV show that they create is called Concentration, and it is literally a reality TV death camp. It's very short, very emotional, very poignant, and is clearly drawing very strong linkings with 1984. And the final grouping I wanted to talk about before my battery dies is two kind of quintessential classic war books, being All Quiet on the Western Front and also Catch-22, which I'm going to put here. Both of them are fantastic, and if you do like them, then you should probably check out Billy Lynn's Long Half-Time Walk. This is looking at modern warfare rather than the First World War and Second World War that you have from the other two, and I just felt like it mirrored a lot of the discussions in both of them about kind of the surrealist nature of war, how when you go back home you can't communicate effectively with people because they've just got no framework for it or understanding of what you've been through, how lost and trapped soldiers must feel and how powerless, and there were so many similarities between the two. So do definitely check them out. I'm now running out of time on my battery, so I just want to say have a wonderful reading week, and I will chat to you soon. Bye guys!